Started? There we go. We have a lot of people registered. And I think maybe have slept in. We're okay with that. I've adopted a philosophy always of saying those who are here are the right people. And so I never really obsess about the numbers. And we're also recording, so we'll share. So Mary, over to you, because you're going to do a bit of an introductory piece. So
I was just going to say, welcome everybody to this Catalyzing Change Week Day 4 session named Locally Driven Innovation Framed by Global Priorities. My name is Mary Arizmendi, and I'm really excited to welcome you into this conversation. A few minutes ago, with Brenda and Mark Andre, we were talking, and they said, I know you're passionate about it. And in fact, I am super passionate, intrigued. And I want to thank you for putting together this really important session. On the other hand, I want to share with everybody that Catalyzing Change Week is about hosting the important conversations that need to happen in the social innovation sector. And it's the moment where all the Catalyst Now members join forces, not only to host these important conversations, but also to bring forward solutions, action driven projects, and where we share this hope and this light. It's not about coming and just noticing everything that needs change or should open more questions, but rather, what are we doing about it? And that's extremely inspirational to me. So I welcome all of you to this session. I want to thank you for making the time, taking the commitment, and showing up today. I agree with Brenda. The people that show up are the people that are really needed in the conversation and that are eager to participate. I did start with a Talking Heads song, and this is because today's session is not about just listening to our hosts, but engaging in the conversation with our hosts. They are hoping for us to participate, to bring ourselves into the session. So I do invite you all to actively participate in the chat. I will be taking a look at the chat all the time. Also, if you want to raise your hand, we'll find a moment to give you space to share your ideas, questions, or comments. And this is a session that's for everybody to engage. So welcome once again, and over to you, Brenda.
what a beautiful setup. Um, that is perfect because I really appreciate your enthusiasm and the fact that this is about hearing other voices for sure. So thank you for that. There's a slide there that also there's a slide that is about Catalyst too. And what I really want to encourage you, if you are not a member of Catalyst now, to think about it because I know from my own experience that this session wouldn't have happened and I wouldn't have met Anne and Marc Andre and Mary. And that's one of the best parts of Catalyst is the network, the global networking, not only global in your own country, but global as well. And there's the information, there's a bit of a vetting process, but it's not extensive. And I think the thing that I find so important right now when everyone is facing financial challenges, joining Catalyst is free. The professional development that is available is free. So it's a great investment for sure, right? Yeah. Okay. So I want to go to this slide and talk about really what's driving us with this, and hopefully a lot of you and others. And it's really funny because a lot of people are talking about this, but I'm not seeing a lot of doing about this. Because one of the things that we do agree on is that the SDGs serve as a great global framework that can be applied locally. But this research, and I think in some ways maybe an educated guess, is being cited by the United Nations, by the World Health Organization, and by the World Economic Forum. And they are saying that 60 to 65% of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the world's most pressing issues, they're not going to happen if we don't generate action and implementation at the local and the regional level. So this is for us is well, why not? And how can we help more of that happen? So well, I want to encourage you to as well before we do a little bit of a deeper dive is to share one thing about you yourself about that might explain to us why you're here. Why have you embraced this idea, or are you even interested in locally driven innovation that's framed by global priorities? So share that, and Mary will help us keep an eye on that. And on the next slide, what I want to share a little bit more about are your there's the chat, and then on the next slide, um, the panelists. And I'm not sure bit more context in a bit, but each of us are just going to very briefly introduce ourselves, and also note that in the chat there's a document there. We don't want to spend a lot of time introducing ourselves unless, well, we want to hear from you. But just if you're interested in our backgrounds, because we're kind of tackling this issue from different perspectives, but you'll see more about each of the presenters and what they're bringing into the conversation. So you can check that link for more detail. But Mark, do you want to just start with a quick overview of you? And then we'll jump to Anne.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the introduction, Brenda. Marc-André Bellil. So I run my own small consulting firm in sustainability, and we are addressing it and developing programs more and more towards triple impact, so economic, social, and environmental. Integrating strategies of circular economy, and also doing impact reporting, project management along those lines, and sustainability coaching to help businesses and organizations in their transition towards better business model and international certification. I'm still a student, so I'm also exploring the principles of regeneration and reciprocity as the strong lines or the ways to think about sustainability and the role of businesses contribution to local territory positive impacts.
Nice.
That's
You.
me in a nutshell.
Can I also
Thank you.
just add that you are the chair of the Quebec chapter?
Yes, absolutely.
We have a Canada chapter. I happen to be the co-chair. But what was clear, and Marc-Andre helped understand, is that Quebec has contacts throughout globally with Francophone, French-speaking communities. And so it made sense to have a Quebec chapter. So, but thank you for that. That's a great intro. And Anne, over to you.
There, I'm Anne Gloger, and I'm the executive director of an organization called Catalyst Circle. Catalyst Circle grew out of more than 2 decades of on-the-ground community building. I was fortunate to be the founding director of the East Scarborough storefront, which saw and sees its role as a local facilitator, integrator, helping the community ecosystem grow stronger over time. And in that space, being so deeply involved, I very quickly realized that a community ecosystem growing stronger over time really required both the social fabric to be strong within the community, but also the connective tissue to be strengthened between what was happening at scale and what was happening on the ground. And it was a disconnect that I felt very deeply. So as we evolved what became the connected community approach, this way of working in community, facilitating local fabric and connective tissue, we decided to spin off a second organization to primarily help systems level players work better with and in communities. The change doesn't necessarily need to happen only in communities. It's the systems that need to change. And so that's the lens that I bring today, and I'm excited to be here.
That's great. Thanks, Anne. So as I said, my name is Brenda Hertzmer, and I'm the co-chair of the Canada chapter. My own social enterprise is called Campus for Communities of the Future. So a lot of community development, but a lot of it is with an eye to strategic foresight. The other thing that I'm doing now is oop, hang on, I just lost you there for a sec. Um, the other thing that I am doing is serving as a catalyst to bring together a new initiative called Reset Communities. And Reset is resilient ecosystems for sustainable engagement and transformation. And if you're interested at all in this subject and the discussion today, we would like you to become a part of that. So I'm just putting that out there. But I'm going to go to the next slide and just well, actually, we can stay here for a bit. It's okay. Sorry. I just want to provide some context for moving forward, because this wow. Apparently, this week is affecting my ability to speak as well as multitask, but it's been a long week. So um, we did this session once before, Anne and Marc Andre and myself, and we did it in Victoria at a somewhat prestigious conference called the Victoria Forum. And it was hosted by the Senate of Canada, which is part of our federal government here in Canada, and the University of Victoria. I managed to slide in a description kind of at the last minute for the conference because it just seems like such a good fit for what we were doing. But here's where the Catalyst Now network pays off, because I was able to pull Anne and Marc Andre into a panel. Every one of the sessions in Victoria was a panel. So you attempted to kind of approach this a subject with different voices. And today our intent is to bring in more of your voices as well. Um, it kind of made sense. All three of us shared a focus on a local. We were all committed to seeing our communities more as an ecosystem than a series of silos. I mean, I don't know about you, but every meeting I've been to for the last 20 years, somebody talked about systems being broken. Not sure the systems are broken, but they're just no longer, the systems we have don't work for the complexity of today. But it was something that we shared, but also it was really more about this holistic approach that we were looking for, this local piece that could be framed by the 17 SDGs and the global priorities. And what happened in Victoria is that I think generally the session went well, but when we debriefed this in preparation for this session, it wasn't quite as good as we thought it could be. And so when we came together to plan this session, we talked extensively. And they're smiling, yes, because it was way more. We thought we thought this would be simpler because we had done it before, but turns out we talked a lot about how to make it better. At one point during this kind of a roller coaster conversation, Marc kind of piped up and referenced a book that he was reading, and the author of this book, and if we can go to the next slide, was also a presenter at the same conference in Victoria. And Vanessa wrote this book called, and the title takes a while to kind of wrap your head around, but it's called Hospicing a Modernity. And really as a result of that book and the fact that we had heard her speak in Victoria, had us reflecting on her thinking that we have to do a lot more reflection in our lives. And I think that we all kind of agreed at that point that we should base this session on opportunities for reflection. So, in general, I think what resonated with us that it was about inviting others to sit in the discomfort and the ambiguity instead of seeking immediate solutions. And for me, I think one of the things that really grabbed me was this quote, and this quote is in the book. And what she said was that whatever happens then, meaning in the future, um, is more on the quality of the relationships in the now, more so than the accuracy or the appeal of images of the future that projects that we each of us project probably differently as a way forward. And I think, and I can't really speak for Mark and Anne, but I think what me upside of the head is that yeah, I'd done a lot of work at the local level. I had learned from some amazing community leaders, and we had really come to some conclusions about what, not necessarily conclusions, but kind of a framework for how we could do this at the local level. But it really got to me because I thought, it's not about trying to impose what we think the future should be. It's really about being in the now and building relationships. That's what's really important. In some cases it's about learning, it's about unlearning, and it's about being better able to respond to the crisis that we're all facing. So does that make sense to all of you? And or Mark, if I missed something there, it was a long conversation, series of long conversations.
I think you captured it well, Brenda. It was really the unpacking of the nuances between our various worldviews that led us to take this approach, because on the surface, they all sound the same. And there are nuances, and nuances are okay as long as we've unpacked the understanding when we're trying to work together. So we're kind of unpacking in real time here with all of you.
That is a really good site, and I think it reinforces that part of our messaging is that there's no one best way. There's a way.
There's
And
ways. There's many ways. It's
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think there
Mhm.
isn't one best way. There's many ways, and it's up to each community to design what works for them. So we want to get into the reflection and hear from you. And thank you for the information in the chat about giving us more information. Does anybody have anything to add at this point about this reflection and where we're going? You can go to the next slide if you want. That's okay. Yeah. Sounds like we're good. Okay, so we ended up with three questions that we think are the basis for reflection for all of us. So you're not just going to hear from your panelists. We really are crossing our fingers and hoping that you will join us as well. But I'm seeing some love and hearts in the chat, so I think we may be on the same page, which is good. So these are the questions. And again, as Anne just referenced, a lot of this was about language too. I know we even find within Catalyst there are a growing number who don't see themselves as being about social innovation. They see themselves as more about systems innovation. We're hearing different languages from different global and national organizations. So we wanted to ask this question for you. How is language helping or hindering the innovation that is going to impact and help us improve social, economic, and environmental well-being? So your experiences with language, that's the first one, and then and reflections on that. And this is going to be, it's really tough to do on a Zoom call, but I think we're going to be bouncing off each other's comments too, and we'll keep an eye on your hands and your comments and make sure we do our best with that. Or Mary does her best with that because she's way better at it than I am. So how's language? And then what critical, in your experience, what critical elements do you think are essential for mobilizing local action and innovation to address complex issues? And their issues, not their issues and opportunities, like those framed by the SDGs. Um, that I think that it might be from your own experience, but it might also be about what do you think is needed? Like you may have some experience, you may not, but you will definitely have some thoughts about uh, what would be essential as elements. And then the third one is, and this is more about you and your organization, because you're obviously interested in this. What do you need to help localize global priorities? What do you need? So I think we should maybe start with language, but if that doesn't speak to you, we're open to you jumping in with another answer. But let's start with, how is language helping or hindering innovation that will impact social, economic, and environmental well-being? And we're gonna shut down the slide deck at this point, and hopefully oh no, we're not really able to see all of you, are we, Mary? Is that? We have a different version of Zoom, I think.
No, it might be that you are on my screen. So at the very top,
Yeah,
you should have two options.
at the very top.
Yeah,
Is
right
everybody else
under.
having the same problem, or is it just me? It's just me.
I can see everybody.
Okay, I'll figure it out, and let's just get this discussion started. Okay.
Brenda, before we continue, make sure to go to the top. It says
Yeah.
view to put gallery mode.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm
I got it.
happy to start us off with a little bit about my experience. For me, the success of my on-the-ground work at the Scarborough storefront, in large parts, what was the ability that we had to speak different languages. And by that, I don't mean English and French. Sorry, Marc-Andre, my French is pitiful. But I do mean that funders particularly, but also other systems level players, constantly ask communities to interpret their work in accordance with the language and framing that they have used. And language denotes, as we all know, a worldview, right? That if the way in which we frame our language is really consistent with how we see the world. And again, funders, governments, other systems level players have a very different lens than communities. And so communities are constantly asked to write a funding proposal, and I'm really good at it. I can go through and I can find all the words they're using, and I can figure out how they relate to what I'm doing on the ground, and I can write a proposal that shows how what we're doing on the ground relates to the funders' way of seeing the world. This is something that we're really learning about Indigenous language. That with the loss of Indigenous language, we're not just losing a language, we're losing a way of seeing the world that is actually much more sustainable, and we have tons to learn from it. And as you lose language, you also lose nuance. So the way language has helped localize systems level change efforts is by communities learning to speak the language of funders. And so in my new world, where I am much more at the systems level, I am helping researchers and municipalities and institutions to speak another language, and that is the language of community, which of course has its own nuanced adaptation for each community. And I want to give you two quick examples, and then I will stop talking. So in the East Scarborough community, the Pan Am Center was being built, a world-class aquatics facility and sports facility ahead of the Pan Am Games. Don't remember what year, like 2016. And it's been being built right in the heart of the community, and the community, of course, had to put up with dust and noise and construction and traffic tie-ups and all those things that come with building something large for years. And we, as a community backbone organization, which, by the way, Brenda calls a systems integrator, or systems catalyst, wanted to make sure that the community was also benefiting from this thing. So we had a series of meetings, all kinds of grassroots groups, organizations coming. And after 3 meetings, we realized that when we said community, we meant the geographic space around this thing that was being built. And when they said community, they were talking about the people who walked in their doors. So we were doing this, right? Because we all wanted what was best for the community, but we defined community differently, and it took 3 meetings to understand that.
Yeah, got it.
That's one story. The second story is more recent, and that is a story of transdisciplinary knowledge co-production. Anybody heard of it? I certainly hadn't before I started working with these fabulous group of researchers. So it turns out that in the research world, there is something called transdisciplinary knowledge co-production, which is intended to open the doors for community development, community university, community researcher partnerships. It's trans across, disciplinary being disciplines, knowledge meaning different ways of knowing and being in that space, co-production doing it together. And yeah, I didn't know anything about it, and they in turn didn't know anything about community development, and that community development was a practice and a discipline, and that in my world, the connected community approach was this robust framework that had been codified in ways that would help them work better with and in community. So again, it took a year. We've written a paper about it called Embracing Emergence, but it took a year for us to understand each other's worldviews well enough to work together. And now the catalytic change in the climate sustainability space in community with community is just amazing and relational, and understanding my understanding of transdisciplinary knowledge co-production and their understanding of community development language, principles, practices has made all the difference.
And where is this group? Is it in British Columbia?
No, this group is in Toronto. The lead research team is the Monk School of Global Affairs at University of Toronto.
I'm just going to say about time, and if they really want to do that, they might want to change their name so you don't have to explain it.
Except that transdisciplinary knowledge co-production in the research global world is a thing that is understood by researchers everywhere. It's not their term. It is, so we've got, across sectors, across researchers understand transdisciplinary knowledge co-production. So that's a really good point though, Brenda, because you and I came across this, is this idea of, do you make up a new word, which means everybody's got to learn a new word, or do you make the existing words more transparent and intelligible and help researchers, for instance, translate into different languages?
It's funny, I just noticed Christy, who was also in Victoria, and I had the pleasure of meeting Christy there. And I don't know if you want to talk about this, Christy, but she's moving from the world of finance and wants to work more and move more into the world of social profits. And it was very confusing. It was very confusing. And even in one of our in our meetings, our chapter meetings, we had a new member who also came from finance, and he said, I don't get this I don't get this. I don't like, he was like, I don't get you guys. It was kind of like that. And he said, he said to me, it's like you got a whole bunch of people, and then you've got three cooks who come in, one from the business sector, one from the social purpose sector, one from government. Those three go into the kitchen, and they all cook their own meals. And so he gave me permission. We're writing this article about it. But he gave me permission to use that, and we're kind of expanding on it now. But he thought, it's really like we're all, each sector is kind of cooking their own meals, and they speak their own language in terms of doing it. But think what it would be like if they all worked collaboratively. What a meal that would be, right? But yeah. Christy, oh, look at Anne. Look at, we're connecting in the chat because Christy and Anne are both in Victoria. So yes, look at that. Christy, did you want to add something to your comment? Because I think it's really true that every system has their own language. It's like alphabet soup. And I think sometimes we see translators as being kind of the sector connectors or systems catalysts who are neutral but can bring everyone together, and together they can figure it out. But Christy, yeah, I don't know if you're, oh, okay. So Caroline, do you want to jump in, because you've got some great comments there that I think would be great to hear verbally. Oh, Christy appears to have gone. Maybe that's why she's ignoring me. But
Hello, everyone. It took me a
there we go.
minute
There's
to
Caroline.
pause,
Okay.
or to unpause, unmute, I
Okay.
should say. Okay, so I think in terms of this discussion, language really matters. And I think we need to have people from very unique, different backgrounds. So
Yeah.
I've always seen myself as a bridge builder between rural and urban, between the educated, the non-educated, the immigrant experience, where as opposed to the experiences of people that have been here for multiple generations, the recognition of everybody. We're not all rich, we're not all poor, regardless of any of our backgrounds. We are just humans and trying to live in the human condition and make a difference for one another. At least that's my goal. Is I'm always pushing people to make a difference for others. It's not just about ourselves. It's how can we come to the table. And I've always seen us like as a potluck where we all come, we bring our dishes and we offer them to each other and we share our stories, we share our ancestral wisdom, we learn from each other, and we respect each other's contexts. We're not, as I said, we're not all rich, we're not all urban, we're not all well positioned in life. And I don't think that should matter. I think whether you're a CEO or you're a farmer or you're a peasant in a faraway country struggling to eke out a living, there are so many similarities, but we need to open up ourselves. Be more vulnerable, take chances on one another, and just come to the table with our dish and say, here I am. How can I make a difference? So my personal life and mission is to encourage, educate, and empower others to make a difference. So I feel like I've talked too much now. I've got lots in the chat. I see we have the ability to save the chat and the transcript. I love that, so we can reflect back on that later too. But if there's anything else you want me to share, I just don't want to hog too much time on everyone.
No, I think that was great. I really appreciate the share. I think, and not only is it's important to bring that diversity together, but I think that's how we get to innovation that's transformative as well. And I put this in the chat, and I'm going to put it on a t-shirt, because one of the things that came out of our work was someone saying the weirder the mix, the better the fix. Which kind of explains so much about the work. Mary, do you want to jump in? And hello, Randy. Hi. We're answering the three questions.
Randy.
I don't know if you've been able to see them in the chat, but this question is about language. And this is a session that is all about reflection and local innovation with a global framework. So Mary, jump in and thank you.
Yeah.
Look at how quick. See, I could never have done that quickly, but that was good. She's reposted the questions for you there. Okay.
So I wanted to say that I completely agree, and thank you, Caroline, for everything you shared. I just think all the time, like, how do we make people notice that we need to be intentional about getting those different voices in the table, in the conversation? Because we also know that there's biases that operate in our daily lives, and these biases make us feel comfortable around people that usually look alike, speak the same language. So if we have to choose, like, our brain instinctively will always go to the people that we are more similar with. So how can we, just bring this curiosity to people? How can we spread? Because I think that everybody that's on this call today already had experiences and values the different opinions, different perspectives, and we know that it nurtures the conversation. But how can we end this call and go into our daily lives and ignite that curiosity? And not only the curiosity, but also the intentionality behind our actions. So one of the things that I think regarding language is that, at least what I'm seeing, and this is my personal view, in the social impact sector, is that we're getting more and more technical. And I don't know how many communities really understand what we're talking about. And I see even terms that I struggle with myself. So I'm like, I dedicate a lot of my time to the social impact sector. What about those people that don't have the opportunity of doing it? How much are they really being invited to the conversation? And I always want to bring that into the conversations that I have, or the equations, to make sure that in the end we don't make complex more complex because of the choice of concepts or the choice of words.
So many gems in there. So I'm sure somebody wants to respond. Ooh.
Well, I'm happy to respond.
Wait, no, just one second. I want to say that is the hardest thing to do in a conversation, is to hold the silence and be patient enough to wait. So thank you for jumping in.
Yes, I think that the language that we choose to use, even the social impact space. So I know tons of people who are having great impact on society who are not in the social impact sector. The language around nonprofits versus social innovators, all those kinds of things. And you're asking about the how. And I think something that I've learned to do is to say, always preface anything jargony with what I call, and when I say that, I mean, so I'm not asking you to adopt my language. I am saying, others refer to it as this, whatever term is most comfortable for you, kinds of things. Because I'm very guilty of using jargon, because it's a shorthand. You can go move more quickly with people who are in the know, kind of thing. Quick story, we used to facilitate a group of 70 grassroots leaders from communities across Toronto. And one of the capacity building team had a exercise where she read a document from it was from the city at that point, and she gave everybody these little squeaky toys. And every time they heard jargon or a word they didn't understand, they were to do the squeaky thing, and the room was just a cacophony of squeaky toys, squeaky noises, because it would, really illustrated how full something that is intended for communities still is of jargon.
That is so funny. If I had had my mic on, you would have heard me laughing pretty loud. I do think sometimes the language is complicated because it's coming top down, and I think that's part of the problem. I think that um, a lot of leaders have been conditioned to think they have to have the answers before they call the meeting, and so I think if you call the meeting, the language that is understood by those you serve will surface. But it takes a long time too to simplify something that is complicated. So I think that I don't know if that's just my experience, and it aligns with what you had said, Mary, as well. I think so much. I think I was working in rural and remote communities, and there was a tendency there to be very blunt, and they would challenge me all the time to use plain language. And I think it's just something to be mindful of. Like, when we were talking about language to describe the need for neutral local leaders with or without a title to um, to bring together different sectors, that weird mix that we were looking for. Um, we let them. We were the guide on the side, and I think that was part of we had to learn to be the guide on the side and let them facilitate the discussion and use their language. Like, we were really talking about those people that were calling the meeting initially. We've used a lot of different. They're called systems orchestrators. They're called systems catalysts. There's different names for that neutral party. And even when we called them sector connectors, we were challenged on it. It was just, so, I think it's just being open to that discussion to say, well, do we need a name for what they're doing? Are they your local coaches, or like they came up with the words. And I think that's part of our lesson of letting go, just letting go. We're not the experts here. We can be an expert on process. That's what's changed maybe. I think that we used to think leaders had to come up with the solutions. That was their job. And I think it's more about coming up with a process. So you hear all those voices, which is what Caroline, you were talking about. We got to hear all those voices. So, yeah. I'm going to use that squeaky toy technique though, too. I think that's really good. Okay. Any additional thoughts about language hindering innovation? Ignacio, nice to see you, hear you, maybe. Yes,
Both,
go ahead. Yeah.
both. You can
Good.
hear me and see me now. Thank you very much for organizing this space. I think it's a fascinating debate. I just wanted to mention something that I've seen, or I found it quite interesting about language. And it's, first of all, I agree completely that language is a way of bringing different voices together, and it plays a crucial role on bringing those voices together and having kind of like a more bottom-up approach that rather than top-down approach, as you were saying, Brenda. But I think it has this capacity of bringing different voices together, but it also and once we see the role of language being played, it can, and I left that comment on the chat, it can create some difficulties because we decide that we need precise definitions for achieving a few things. So we have seen this on what is climate change, what is energy transition, and we spent. I worked for a few years with University College of London in the UK, and they did a very interesting work around the legacy of the Olympics in 2012, and then the whole debate was around what is legacy, and then how different people understand legacy, and they created a bunch of different tables to understand and define what legacy is, which I think it's good, but we need to move forward at a certain point to actually make things happen instead of trying to define and have a very kind of like square definition of what these words around innovation and social impact and even the SDGs mean. So I think that's very interesting, and I just wanted to say that another very important aspect of language is that not everything needs to be verbal or written. I think this is a very powerful thing when you say like, okay, how do you envision the future? And then you ask someone to draw that future instead of writing or to write or to express verbally what that future is, because I think there's many other ways of using other forms of language that can help us a lot. And I have seen that kind of like form of research when you go out locally and ask people to take pictures or draw or use other forms of expression that could bring that vision of a better future.
Am I hearing you suggest, and because I think there's some merit there, and Anne has said something similar to this, is that why do we need to name it? But I think we sometimes the name may come later, but I think do we have um, the a desire to design the language and put it so we can put it in a box and maybe is that what, because that's kind of what I was hearing too. We need to be a little more relaxed maybe about that and let it emerge. Not
Yeah,
sure.
I think we need to know how to play with it. No,
Yeah,
it can
play.
it need to be it needs to have certain flexibility in order to move forward, no, and to act on what we want to achieve.
Nice. And Marc-Andre, we haven't heard from you. I want before we leave
Yeah.
this question. As
Well,
a
there's a lot of interesting
yeah,
conversation going in the ways that I'm thinking, and I started to put some comments in the chat also to keep the space for people that are talking. But I think in that language exchange is a relationship, like what we're talking. So it concerns the experience, the life, the things of interest for each of the parties in that conversation, the language. So, but I think we need to be well, there's a risk with modernity of trying to focus that there's only one meaning for everything that predominates the rest and dictates how we're supposed to think and reflect and what gives the field of possibilities of what could be innovative. So the danger with that is that we're limiting the contributions, the diversity of ways of thinking. So we're kind of really limiting what is the potential outcome. But so I think in the language, if we don't want to limit, there's a risk for how we talk also. Are we shutting the door to other people in the way that we're talking as an expert and not giving them the space to participate to the conversation? So there's the way that we listen, but there's the way that we talk also. So I think if we develop a reflex of being careful, say, okay, the way I'm saying this, am I making it accessible and inviting for others to do it? Or am I just like trying to run away with it as I'm the expert and I have the control of it and nobody can challenge it? So I think that in the disciplinary approach, there's that. And even sometimes in the transdisciplinary, everybody's trying to pull the blanket on their side. Maybe there's that risk of say what definition is going to dominate the others because we're in that modernity mindset of something needs to predominate, maybe from that Greek philosophy ancestral way of thinking that there's one truth and only one truth. But now we're starting to see that there could be a coexistence of many
yeah,
beliefs, many truths, and how do we bring that into the language towards innovation? So giving that
nice.
space, am I
Yeah,
reflecting? And maybe the role of translators or people that are in between is just that, is to listen, say, okay, you said it that way, or you're trying to say it this way and transform a bit or reformulate the way it's being said so that it represents the interest of or the value of what is being brought by the expert or originator of what's being said, and reformulate in a way that it creates the space for knowing what are the other parties that are at the table and reformulating in a way that it seems inviting or that gives space for the other party. So the translator or integrator has a really strong role and requires a lot of skills and a lot of knowledge. It's to be able to pay attention to what is being said and find a way to present in the way that it could be well received and opens that door.
Yeah,
Those are my
that's a really
thoughts.
important role. I'm very mindful of the time. We do have an hour and a half, and we hope that you will stay with us. But I want to move on to the second question. But I also want to make sure that we hear from the others who haven't had a chance to talk it up yet. But there's some great comments. Thank you, Isabel. I like what you said about the community organizing piece. But I'm going to move on to the second question. We can always come back. You can always throw your comments about language in there somewhere because we're not that structured. But we wanted to hear from you about what critical elements are essential for mobilizing local action to get to these complex issues, like the things that are framed by the UN 17 SDGs. So what's missing? Why aren't we doing this? What needs to be in place?
I'll quickly jump in.
Thank you, Christy.
I think there are a ton of essential elements. I think right now funding is a major one. I know that we can often do things voluntarily and there are ways to engage people, but it's quite challenging, especially given the economic state for many people. So that's a major one. I think trust is lacking. There's a lot of division. I work in public health, so we're often talking about misinformation, disinformation. How people are kind of on one side or the other often. So, especially given the outcomes of the pandemic and increased division, and again, speaking about language and how it's exclusionary for some, and some of those pieces that really drive people in one direction or another. And then I think for some, depending on where you are in your life, it's just time and energy. I know I have two children, 6 and 3. And so sometimes the things I want to be able to accomplish and contribute to, I just don't have the time or space for. So yeah, it's really dependent on what we're looking to work on and solve. But there's a lot of complexity out there in various communities. So yeah, big question, lots to think about.
Yeah, I have a question for you because I'm really glad to have someone from health in this meeting. I think the question or the thing that I've learned is that the funding is an issue because there isn't policy to fund initiatives that cross sectors or to facilitate. David Bonberg from Ashoka on one of in one of the meetings this week said that we need to fund those who build ecosystems. So those neutral parties or translators. Yeah, that's it. But I think that policy is missing, and therefore we don't have the funding. And I think it's especially true in health, from what I can see. But is that the case? Is that policy to keep people even healthy and uh, all those determinants of health?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite complex the way that the funding formulas works. So I've worked for 3 different departments for the federal government somehow. I came from the nonprofit sector, but I've been here for a little while. So um, yeah, there's a real focus on roles and responsibilities and making sure that we are staying in our lane and doing what we're supposed to do, because there are other departments who work on these other things. At the same time, if you do a good job with interdepartmental collaboration, you can streamline some of those things. So I used to work on Indigenous education policy. We could work with CIRNAC and ISK to channel our funds all into one streamlined funding source so that partners didn't have to report multiple times to multiple departments, for example, on what they were doing with the money. But I think there is that real sense of not stepping on other people's toes, and especially in health, where it's really the provinces and territories who are responsible for a lot of it. So it's really that jurisdictional thing that gets sticky. And the federal government wants to make sure that they're very clearly laying out where their funds go. So
I think what you've also pointed to is that it's the system sometimes that
yes.
Are holding this in place. I remember I worked with one Ministry of Health, and the people there, the employees, were not allowed to talk to anyone above them in the hierarchy. And I thought, well, how's that going to work in terms of collaboration? So is it the system too? So is it, I think, because I think you've named funding, you've named policy, you've named the systems. Are there specifics within those categories, or are there other categories that are holding us in place?
Yeah, I mean, the systems themselves. So structurally, obviously, colonial structure that we operate through, we have these specific ways of doing. Don't get me started on the Indian Act and some of the other ways in which we fund or don't fund Indigenous programs and projects. So yeah, I mean, the systems need to be rejigged, but that is a very long road. Changing the legislation, what that means for the people who are currently recipients of said legislation. So various programs operate through policies and legislation, and that could have ripple effects. So it's quite complex and complicated, but yes, the systems certainly could use some repair.
So here's a question for all of you, because I've also in my research and in my own personal experience, it's pretty much impossible to change a system from inside the system, and that it's often been said we need new systems. So if we had new systems that would help us with this, this local innovation and action framed by global, what would that system have to look like? What would make it work?
Just quickly hop in again. I'll just say interrelationships that are actually reciprocal, where power structures are distributed. So it's not, we have all the answers and sure, you can share some ideas with us, the little people on the ground. And finding ways to, redistribute the power and make sure that there is equal priority on all sides, because that's the other piece working for the federal government is our priorities are our priorities, and that's nice what the partners want to do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but here's where we're channeling our efforts. So I think it's really that distribution of power and focus.
It's kind of it's reversing the hierarchy. I mean, instead of coming grass tops down, grassroots up. I always just think everything would be so much easier in terms of priorities, if we just asked the people that would be impacted first. Start there. Like it's not that hard. Call the meeting and listen. It's not, I don't think it's rocket science, but Mary, yeah, jump.
So I have like a pretty simple idea, but I think it's
Oh,
really
sometimes simple
necessary
is brilliant. Don't ever apologize for simple.
that it's time. I think we need time. I think that, I don't know, I always wonder like what would happen if we allocated like at least one morning from Monday to Friday just to research, about other organizations doing the same work, or just having virtual coffees or in-person coffees, even better, with people to find out what they're doing, where they're putting their energy. Sometimes it seems like we're all trying to go in the same direction, but we're so invested in what we're doing that it's hard for us to just pause and look around and admire, the wonders that all the rest is doing. And I think that to create that understanding between cultures, between the different levels, between the different sector actors, we do need to have time, and this time not to
Time
be
for reflections.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's lots of response. I don't know if you're watching, but lots of response and agreement
Yeah.
with what you just said. So simple sometimes is very good. I don't, I think sometimes we make it too complicated, but I think a lot of what I'm seeing is that and I think that's the value of not being part of a big organization as a small social entrepreneur. I don't have to manage what you guys have to manage when you're part of a bureaucracy. It's people. Yeah, you're not like those of you who have had experience within bureaucracies. We recognize how challenging that is. So, but
I
then I
think with
sometimes,
the
yeah, go ahead.
I agree with Mary, and that's what Christy was saying also about the time. And we need
Mm,
decisions are being taken with those that have the information. So there's an educational problem of not being able to be aware about what is the context and being able to first be motivated to want to participate to a decision making process, and then having the time to actually sit at the table and discover and learn from the others. So there's and so that time is in a job or in an office or is reserved for the person that is designed for the decision taking. And so as long as there's not more time that is created for the other employees, they're never gonna be available to be part of the decision taking, and decisions will always be the same, or concerns or answer the interest of the ones that are taking decisions that already have the time. So I think there's that hierarchy model that is destructive and doesn't give that space. We need time to. It's like that for anything, even in society. People don't have time to inform themselves about where the society is going. They're busy with entertainment and work, and it's stuck between that. And that's even a social decision that there should be something that incites people to take time to be more aware, to research, to inform themselves. And I don't know what would be the incentive, but the same thing applies at any level of our organization, whether it's social or in within an institution or a private organization, private company. So I just wanted to reinforce that
That's great.
simple idea about time.
Yes,
Thank you, Mary.
perfect. And we'll go to you and then Ignacio, and then I'm going to switch to the last question, which you can take a look at and prepare. Wow,
I
this
think there's I was reading a researcher called Kate Marple, and she said what, I know in my heart and my experience to be true, and that is we need to abandon the what for the why.
always.
There's very little understanding, shared understanding, articulation of why we're doing what we're doing. We tend to focus on, to Marie's point, what we're doing. And we're so focused on what. And when you elevate the conversation to why, you can begin to see an ecosystem of players and the contribution towards that why. When you focus on what, everybody's doing their unique siloed what, and there's no way to find common ground. And that's when those endless meetings that are supposed to be collaborative, I'm sure you've all been to, where everybody stands up and says, this is what I'm doing, and there's no way to build bridges across it because we don't get to the why. It's just
Nice.
the what.
Very astute. Your experiential intelligence is surfacing there. The EQ. Sorry, no, the XQ. We were talking yesterday about IQ, EQ, and now there's XQ, experiential intelligence. Ignacio.
Yes, I just wanted to add something, and I think it's quite aligned with what Anne was saying around these elements. I think one of the very important aspects of or elements that we need to bring these local views and local solutions is the willingness of to test things together. I currently actually work with the government of Colombia, and I have seen that for a government is all the relationships are I'm looking for a supplier. No, I'm looking for someone that will bring me this kind of stuff, which it's actually something very hard to change. And I've been trying to do this for a few months now, but it's basically instead of looking at the rest of the actors as suppliers, you need to be able and you need to test with them. You need to work together. And I think having that kind of like change of mindset where you recognize the importance of testing and iterate things are very important to kind of like balance those power dynamics that Christy was talking about, because if not, it's going to be always very hard to see as I was saying, like I'm doing this and you are doing this, and you will provide whatever I'm asking for in a contract. No, it's kind of like more.
It is a different kind of leadership, I think, that
Yeah.
we're talking about, that doesn't necessarily exist, which is why we're managing more than leading. The one, oh, you go ahead. I just had one thought I was going to close on before we go to the next question. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think it's a question. I like what Ignacio just said. I think there's a question of vision also, that we're looking at really short term, but
Yeah.
in the longer term, you see who is involved, how it's going to affect many in that longer relationship that we're building in that ecosystem. And I think it brings us to the question of the why, but the why is also the what. Like what do we want in the future? What are we trying to improve? And we're having that conversation, Anne and Brenda, this week. What are we trying to improve in the innovation? What's the system? And with the articles or the elements that we bring into it, are we going backwards or trying to improve something that is just not working, but we know we should change the system? Are we prolonging the system? Are we trying to do something good that's going to bring some elements of good, but because we lack the vision, is going to create other bads for other aspects in the medium term? So I think that's that element of wider vision and more inclusive vision is critical.
Nice. I'm just want to add one comment, and then we'll go to the third question, which is about what you need to localize the local action globally framed. But what I just want to share in my experience, one of the ways we can make better informed decisions and lead rather than simply react or manage, it is to do more with the people who live in a community, because they really are the true experts. And in my experience, they don't not necessarily have a title, but man, do they get things done. So, I've thought a lot about why is it that they can do so much without not necessarily having a lot of money. But I realize it's because they're not stuck where they have the hierarchy or the red tape or the policies. They just get things done. So if we can all make friends with the people we're trying to serve, then it gets so much easier. It just you're not pushing the rock uphill. I think that's the difference. So let's talk a bit because we don't have a lot of time. But what do you need? What would be helpful? And I think we've kind of touched on some things, but this is about if you were going to engage the community where you live, or if you work with a team who needs to do that, what do you need? How can we help? And did you just unmute? Oh, sorry.
No, I was unmuted
Oh,
anyway. I'm eager to hear from everybody else.
I could jump in on that quickly. I think support and flexibility. So there tends to be a kind of rigid approach to certain types of work. And so I think people who have open minds and allow for the possibility that you can innovate in a way that they can't imagine. I think sometimes there's this really structured framing that happens, at least in public health, where it needs to be something that has been done or something that someone can imagine that's tangible. For example, I am working on a relational asset map for disease response. And this was like a thing that I weaseled into my work because like we kept seeing all these reports saying we're not localized enough. Our response is too high level. We're not reaching priority communities, all of these things. But yet everybody wanted to do it the same way. Well, here's how we do it and here's how we work. And so slowly, I hope this is like changing minds. And if there's success with this map, it might remind people that we can cross boundaries and we don't have to be so obsessed with our own little corner of the earth. So anyways,
Yeah,
I'll stop
I get
rambling.
I get that for sure. I flinch every time I hear health say best practices. I don't think there are any best practices. I think there's promising practices. And one of the things a futurist told me was that research only tells us what's already happened and can be proven. And we're preparing a future that hasn't been invented yet. So we have to loosen up. We really do have to loosen up. And I think it's more about funding outcomes. And that's the why, Anne. I'm coming back to your why. Outcomes are why we are doing something in the first place. And then to me, if you led by outcomes, then you can let go and be less rigid. Because if everyone agrees that what it is where the why, then you're all on the same page. And who cares how you get it done? Like just deliver those outcomes. So yeah.
Can
Okay.
I jump in on language very quickly?
Yes.
Language of outcomes.
You see,
So
it's all
outcomes
connected.
tend to be viewed as SMART goals, measurable, timely, that you are going to predict now. Not that I don't disagree with you, but outcomes in my experience for most people who are rigid are okay, predict now 5 years from now exactly how many people will be impacted exactly in how much way, in what way, and everything we do has to work towards that outcome. And the reality is, to your point, Brenda, that the future hasn't been created yet. And so therefore we know the direction we're going, we know our purpose, but we can't pinpoint exactly what that's going to look like in 5 years. So that language of outcomes even trips us up, even though agreed that we need to fund and focus on where we're going.
I think the point is valid again, comes back to language. I think a lot of people are still talking outputs. Outcomes, especially in terms of strengthening a community, are challenging, and they're challenging to measure, but they can be measured, in my experience. But it's more qualitative data. It's the warm data that Norma Bateson talks about. She talks about warm data. And just by way of example, one of the Indigenous communities that we worked with, part of our evaluation, our measurement was going back to the community to ask what was different. What was different? And one of the outcomes that they articulated was hope. That bringing them together, coaching them to really implement more of their own traditional Indigenous ways, gave them hope, showed them what they could do when they worked together. So to me, if we get to hope, like help people become more hopeful and motivated, that's a great outcome, but it's not an output or what is typically being thought of by bureaucrats. So yeah.
Great.
Do people understand a lot of that? Is learning something? Oh, that's fun. Look at what hope. Is that a rock? Neat. Okay, there you go. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. So the we're still on talking about what you need. So any other thoughts? The perfect world. This is like a really kind of a visioning exercise, but truly I think that we're trying to make this, we're trying to put some landing gear under these aspirations.
I thought could be interesting to make the difference between technical improvements or advancements compared to what is real progress or innovations that actually improves the like gives a better quality or experience to many because in the research sometimes very oriented towards producing, like we're talking about outcome. So what's the meaning of the outcome? Is it just to prove something, bring the data, prove you're right about something, but actually doesn't bring much of a difference to the world, or it brings negative consequences in the longer term? Like you have from a text that I shared yesterday, and it shows that there could be military technology progress. What's the idea of progress? It's a technical advancement, but in terms of world progress, it's not a real progress. You're creating more insecurity and more risk, or encouraging practices that puts everybody's life in danger. So what's the idea of progress when
So,
it's about advancing a technology, and that could be applicable to social systems as well. There's initiatives that could be developed. It's very inventive, but very original. But is it really going? It's just proving something that there was something that was delivered by government or institution. But in the longer term, congratulations, you're applauded for the initiative. But it's very inventive, but it's not creating necessarily the better.
you know, I think, Marc-Andre, maybe, I'm not sure, but I think what you're talking about, because I think this is what's missing from a lot of um, our direction and funding and everything else, is that it's about values. Have we articulated what's important? And not
Yes,
only, like, I see a lot of poster boards that say this is, here, this is what our organization stands for. They have the values, but I think there needs to be a lot of discussion about, well, what does that value
I
mean? And
agree.
will we
I agree.
represent that?
That's the
Yeah,
gap. What's the
yeah,
value of the mission that you're trying to deliver in terms of future
yeah,
impact? Because you see the big picture, but the funders, the value they're trying to fit in the purpose of the funding, does it
yeah,
check that box, or where does it fit? We're not
yeah.
talking about the same value.
Yeah, I was when I'm working with communities, we typically start with values and then get to outcomes and get the discussion ends up getting some consensus. And it does. I know one community, when they did a community master plan, the number one value and outcome that they were seeing was a desire to protect and enjoy the natural environment that surrounded their community. And the municipal staff looked at one another and realized they weren't doing any of that. They weren't. They weren't. And family opportunities for enjoyment was another piece. They weren't doing anything that was providing services or programs for I guess it was family recreation and culture. So that discussion of outcomes and values kind of gets you to something different, but it's a way of getting consensus, I guess, too. That would be good. Hmm. Okay. Anything else you need besides winning the lottery and or finding a foundation that's got a lot of money? That's still, you know what? I got to tell you, um, an executive director of a nonprofit organization said, you know what? You could double the amount of money you put into the sector, you wouldn't make a difference because it's about change, it's about transformation, it's about innovation. Yeah. So clearly you're already on that page. You already know that.
When you're talking about what's the outcomes, we need to kind of a broader view of what's missing in a given territory. I try to look from a anti-collapse perspective of what's the well-being on the territory, and say what's the requirements for it to be healthy. The same as you go to the doctor, and what would be a potential risk for your health, and how do you prevent? How do you prevent that for your own personal health? But how is that doable, or have that reflection from the context of a territory or community and the larger idea of the community? And the same
So
as we do for the planetary limits, also, or environmental collapse, but we can bring it even to a social level. There's a set of conditions for the well-being.
So is that different from outcomes? Or is it more about, is that in the indicators, like the determinants of
Yes,
what would be
it's
achieved?
different because the outcomes is what is produced either by the individual or the organization, but then it bounces on what's the context, what are the needs on that territory, and what's going to make the sustainability is that connection. How are the outcomes contributing to the well-being on the territory?
Got it. And
Yeah, just in that same vein, it strikes me that when people talk about localizing SDGs or any other systems level framework, community is either thought of as recipients of social services, which is the big, the most community funding goes to helping individuals cope with the system as it is, or a collection of individuals who happen to live in the same space and whose opinions matter to systems level players, and so individual systems. And both those things are valid. Like, public consultation is important, social services are important, but there is the thing I think we're talking about is a third way to view community, and that is rich ecosystems of action that are happening all the time, and that whether that is one neighbor helping another neighbor, that is part of the ecosystem that is happening on the ground. And the way in which people organize, and local grassroots groups and micro-organizations organize in community, can be strengthened when we localize things like the SDGs, but only if we see them as active agents of change and collective change, rather than either individuals who need to be consulted or receive services. It really isn't an either or, but that's a big missing piece.
Yeah.
Thank you for your reinforcement there, Carol.
Isn't it great when you're speaking and you look up and people are nodding? It's just, we don't always get a lot of that because we are kind of on the edge of what other people are doing.
And Zoom is so hard. I feed off an audience when I'm, in speaking in public, but Zoom is harder.
Nice. Isabella, I'm so glad you have your hand up. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. And sorry, I'm in transit, so I'm not able to be on video, but just tying together a couple of comments from before, all of them I agree with, and Carol's comment in the chat that exact impacts or outcomes cannot be known, in advance. I just wanted to bring in the dimension of unintended negative impacts and outcomes that so many development and humanitarian and all sorts of other work has had and will have. I mean, this is something that can be perhaps mitigated but not entirely avoided, right? And that's why the traditional meal monitoring, evaluation, learning frameworks almost always lack in being able to predict those, because some of them are unpredictable. And if we're completely rigidly fixed with the indicators we set 5 years ago, predicting what we should be measuring and tracking, we will miss out sometimes at a real risk to notice the unintended, both negative and positive outcomes we're having. And I've seen that just years and years of case studies on this question in a number of humanitarian contexts in particular, but also long-term development contexts, where seemingly well-intentioned efforts, right, to, let's say, distribute boats and fishing equipment to women and to Dalit communities after the tsunami in India seemed really great at the time. Like, let's equalize, let's do some social engineering, let's give fishing boats and fiberglass GPS powered fishing boats to everyone. But, we went and traveled all the way up and down the coast in Tamil Nadu 7-8 years later, something that very few organizations do, right? Ex post evaluations, actually looking at those long-term impacts. And the stories were really complicated, nuanced, like lots of unintended impacts, a mixed bag I'm not going to go into, but all sorts of impacts on environment, overfishing, labor equation, conflict between women and men, husbands and wives, Dalit communities and other communities, things that maybe some of this could have been predicted if the humanitarian agencies went in with some of that context analysis in their end. So I think, any development and redistribution of income will cause conflict, and we have to be able to manage it. And I don't know if we have enough of that capacity built in. So maybe on the question of what do we need to think about what that means, managing of conflict, which is unavoidable.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different it's a different kind of leadership and a different kind of competencies and skills and knowledge. And I think that is something we're planning to have already started to address. But what a great conversation, I'll tell you. We need to do more of this. And Mary, I have a feeling that we need to continue this in a conversation cafe at a later date through Catalyst. So hopefully if you're part of Catalyst, you'll get a notification. But what a fabulous conversation. I know that you've given me and probably everyone else in the meeting a lot to think about, and that is so valued. And I think if I needed anything, I need more time to talk to people like you. So thank you so much. And I don't know, Mary, if you have anything you need to close on or if anyone else has, but I know we got 1 minute. We got.
No, I just want to say thank you, Brenda and Marc-André, for this amazing conversation. You definitely staged the conversation in a way that made us all feel welcome. And I really want to say thank you to everybody that joined today and how much you participated. I was thinking of not only sharing the recording of the video that will be uploaded in our official YouTube channel, but also the chat, if you agree, because there's so much value in the resources that you shared through the chat and your comments, thoughts, even questions, and some exchanges that were just amazing to see. So not only the verbal conversation, but also the written conversation that happened today was amazing. And last, of course, we can definitely continue the conversation in another space. We can host a conversation cafe. I'll be super, super thrilled to support you along the way. So then we can talk through email to finalize the details. But thank you once again. This marks the end of day 4 in Catalyzing Change Week 2025. So I'm wishing you a really, really nice afternoon or rest of the day. Enjoy, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow in some other meaningful conversations.
Thank you so very much. It's just been an honor.
Maybe we can share LinkedIn links if people want to connect.
Oh, yeah.
Quickly.
If you're
Let
not okay
me-
with that, just let us know. I don't think anyone has said anything that is, I don't know that anybody would look at it if they weren't, because they probably wouldn't be interested in the subject, right? I don't know if that made sense, but okay. Thank you all so very, very, very much.
Sorry, I'm gonna put again the document to access the more information about our panelists. So if you access that Google document, you will see the email, you will also see the LinkedIn and some more details. So in case you want to contact them, you're very welcome to do so. Christy, thank you for your chat, for your comment. I did notice. And hopefully I'll see you all soon.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.